Okay, welcome to my second dosage calculation video. Today, we're going to talk about factors, specifically conversion factors. Once we have all of our approximate equivalents memorized, once we know, how many inches there are in a foot, how many centimeters in an inch, how many milliliters in a cup, that sort of thing, we can then begin to use those in order to convert between one unit and another. And this is just the first method that we use to do that. I'm going to talk about dosage calculations and dimensional analysis in my next video. But for now, let's do just kind of a quick talk about, what do we do when we use them as a factor? So when specifically, this is the question, do we multiply and when do we divide? So let's take a look at an example here that is going to illustrate to you, I hope, how we can tackle this question. Right here, we have for ourselves a black lined rectangle, right? And you can see based on the red and the blue lines here that this rectangle is 1 mile long, according to this red notification here. And on the bottom, we see that it is a number of feet, but we don't know how many. Right, that's what the x here is. It's just a variable saying we are not sure what the number of feet is. So my question for you, the viewer, is this. Logically, think this through. You don't have to know the exact number, but logically, if this is 1 mile long, is it more than 1 foot long or is it less than 1 foot long? Think about how long a mile is. Maybe like me, you're thinking about a nearby supermarket. You're thinking about a street that's about a mile away. You're thinking of some landmark. Or maybe you're thinking about a track, right? Having to run so many times around a track equals a mile. Now think about the distance of 1 foot. If you're like me, you're looking at your computer screen, right? Or maybe you're looking at something that's nearby, your water bottle or your pen. Those two distances are vastly different, right? A mile is so much larger than a singular foot. So the question remains, how many feet are going to fit into this rectangle? Is it going to be more than 1 or less than 1? Is x larger or smaller than the number of miles that we have here? If your answer was that x is going to be larger, that is correct. That makes sense, right? Even if you think about the difference between 1 mile and 2 feet, 2 feet is still a lot smaller than a mile. And in fact, we have to have 5,280 feet in order to fill in this same distance. So we run into this truth that when you convert between two units, if you have a large number, it is always going to be associated with the smaller unit. When you convert it, the number gets smaller and the unit gets bigger. So we can see an example of this. If you convert 1 mile to feet, we know that a mile is a larger unit than a foot. So the question is 1 going to get larger or is it going to get smaller? Is the number 1 shown here, right? The smaller number or the larger number? We know because, right, remember, the number gets smaller as the unit gets larger, and vice versa. As the unit gets smaller, the number gets bigger. We know this. So if we come back down here, 1 mile, that's going to be our small number. And our large number is going to be associated with feet. So I'm going to actually have to write this a little bit sideways, 5,280. So if you go from a large unit to a small unit, answer this question for yourself before I write it down here. The number must get what? Larger or smaller? If you go from a large unit to a small unit, the number must get larger, right? And we can see this too. If we write this out symbolically, we can see that if we have a large unit, oh, whoops, a large unit, and we're going to, whoops, bear with me here, a small unit, our number, which started out small comparatively, right, must get larger. It has to become bigger. If you go from a small unit to a large unit, answer this question for yourself. The number must get what? Larger or smaller? It must get smaller, right? Let's look back at this page here. If we have the opposite situation where we go from a small unit to a large unit, then our large number must get smaller. Bit crammed, my apologies. So here's my next question. How do we make a number bigger? Do we multiply it or do we divide it? Let's find out, right? Let's do a simple math equation. 10, right? If we want to make this number larger, we could multiply it by 2, or we could divide it by 2. Which one of these is going to make this number larger? Answer it for yourself, right? 10 times 2 is 20. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So we can see very plainly here that if you want to make a number larger, you need to multiply it. Conversely, if we want to make a number smaller, we divide. So we can even sum this up by saying that if your unit gets smaller, you need to multiply. And if your unit gets larger, you need to divide. Let's practice. Let's do a little practice here. Let's say that you have 1,000 milligrams and you want to know how many grams is that? First thing we need to do is figure out which of these units is larger and which one is smaller. Is a gram larger than a milligram? In the metric system, is our base unit larger than 1,000th of that unit? Absolutely it is, right? And so we're going to write this in our big blue font here, our big thick blue font. And milligram is going to be in our small blue font. So now our question is this: is our number going from small to large going to get larger or smaller? Let's come back to this screen here. If we go from a small unit to a large unit, is our number going to get bigger or smaller? It's going to get smaller, right? We already decided that when you go from a small to a large unit, you divide. And so if this number right here must get smaller, then it's clearly already the bigger, the bigger number. So we're going to write this in our thick font here. So 1,000 milligrams is equal to how many grams? That's our question now. What, pray tell, then, is our equivalent that we're using? Our equivalent that we're using is going to be that 1 gram is equal to 1,000 milligrams, right? That is our conversion, right? That's our equivalent. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take this number here, which we can rewrite as, if we divide by 1 milligram, or sorry, by 1 gram on both sides, we can actually rewrite this as 1,000 milligrams per gram, okay? Now if we do this mathematically, remembering that we are going to need to make this smaller, so we are dividing, we can take our original number, our original 1,000 milligrams, and divide it by our conversion factor, 1,000 milligrams per gram. If you're like me and you like knowing that the units cancel out, you've got milligram on top and what this gives you, of course, right, is 1,000 milligrams divided by 1,000 milligrams per gram. You end up with 1 gram as your answer. Now let's come back up here. Easy way to check your math here. Is the number 1 smaller than 1,000? Yes, it is. So this, we can reasonably say, is accurate. And if you want to look again, obviously, right, our conversion factor was this identity that we had. Let's do another one with a bit of a harder number. What if we have the problem of having 8 teaspoons, tablespoons, and we need to figure out how many teaspoons is that? First thing we're going to do is we're going to rewrite this with our understanding of the sizes of these units. Is a tablespoon bigger than a teaspoon? If you don't know the answer, a really great way of practicing this, for the record, is actually to go into your kitchen, see what your tablespoons and your teaspoons look like. One of the ways that I like to practice dosage calc is to look up recipes and convert the units there. But here we have teaspoons. Teaspoons are, in fact, smaller. So we're going to write that in our thin blue font. We're going to write tablespoons in our thick blue font. So if tablespoons is the larger unit and we're going to a smaller unit, is 8 going to get bigger or is it going to get smaller? It's going to get bigger, right? And so 8 has to be the smaller number here, which means we are looking for a larger number to answer this question. Let's take a look at what our conversion equation is. We have here 1 tablespoon is equal to 3 teaspoons. So if we pull our numbers together, right, looking at our problem here, we're going to write our, whoopsie daisy. There's a little bit jumping the gun on that. We have our 8 tablespoons. And are we going to multiply or divide? Remember, we have a small number. We want it to get bigger. Are we going to multiply or divide? We're going to multiply, right? That's what this means. If our number has to get bigger, we have to multiply. We're going to multiply it by our conversion. So 3 teaspoons. We could do the whole division thing and say teaspoons per tablespoon, but we understand that that's not super necessary. And we can just do that math. 8 times 3, our answer is 24 teaspoons. And if you want to check this for yourself, go into your kitchen, scoop up 8 tablespoons of flour, and then scoop up 24 tablespoons of flour, or water, actually. That way you're not wasting flour. But you can check this for yourself, and this is actually a really great method of checking your own work, even if it's not going back and doing the math over again. It's a nice, easy checkpoint that you can determine whether or not you are correct, or close to correct.